Thank you for coming today. I'm attorney Gloria Allred. I will have a statement, and then Jane Doe, who is with me here, will have a very brief statement. Then I'll be happy to answer questions. She will not be answering questions. We've had a little difficulty with our Zoom today. If there is a problem, then we will be happy to send anyone who is listening a copy of the statement and also the lawsuit. Today we are here to announce that on behalf of our client Jane Doe, we have filed, served, and are litigating a civil lawsuit alleging child sexual abuse against Roman Polanski. We filed this lawsuit in Los Angeles County Superior Court in Santa Monica, California on June 16th, 2023. We then served the defendant, Mr. Polanski, with our case at his home on September 5th, 2023 in Paris, France. Plaintiff alleges that she met defendant Polanski at a party in 1973 when she was a minor. She alleges that months later, defendant invited her to dinner and she accepted his invitation. She alleges that defendant Polanski knew that she was a minor. Jane Doe alleges in the lawsuit that the evening that she was to have dinner with defendant, she met him at his home in Benedict Canyon. Plaintiff further alleges that at the house, defendant gave plaintiff, whom he knew was a minor, 2 shots of tequila. Thereafter, she alleges that defendant Polanski drove himself and plaintiff to dinner at Le Restaurant, which was located on La Cienega in Los Angeles. Their table was not ready when they arrived, and they sat in the bar where defendant Polanski ordered plaintiff more tequila. After being seated, but before they ate, plaintiff alleges that she began feeling dizzy from the tequila, and then she went to the restroom where she was ill. When she returned to the table, she told defendant that she didn't feel well and that she was going to go outside to get some fresh air. Plaintiff alleges that defendant Polanski followed plaintiff outside and then drove her back to his house. Plaintiff does not recall how she got from the car into defendant's home. Plaintiff recalls that defendant Polanski led her into his bedroom and that she passed out on his bed. Plaintiff alleges that she remembers waking up in defendant's bed with him lying in the bed next to her. He told her that he wanted to have sex with her. Plaintiff, though groggy, alleges that she told defendant, quote, no, end quote. She told him, quote, please don't do this, end quote. She alleges that he ignored her pleas. She also alleges that defendant Polanski removed plaintiff's clothes, and he proceeded to sexually assault her, causing her tremendous physical and emotional pain and suffering. She further alleges that after defendant ejaculated, he drove plaintiff home. That was the last time that plaintiff saw defendant. Our client's filed complaint alleges rape, sexual battery against defendant Polanski, and intentional infliction of severe emotional distress against him. We are seeking damages according to proof at trial. Last Friday, March 8th, 2024, my partner Nathan Goldberg and I attended a virtual case management conference on this matter, and the judge assigned us a trial date of August 4th, 2025 at 10:00 a.m. for a 10-day jury trial. In 2017, I held a press conference with Jane Doe, who alleged at that time that Mr. Polanski had sexually victimized her when she was a minor, and that she was, quote, infuriated, end quote, that the victim, Samantha Geimer, in Mr. Polanski's prior criminal case, asked the court to dismiss the criminal case against Mr. Polanski after he fled California prior to being sentenced. Judge Scott Gordon, in rejecting the defendant's request, stated, quote, "Polanski cannot avail himself of the court while standing in contempt of it," end quote. Although the Los Angeles County DA's office has sought to extradite Mr. Polanski from France on the criminal case to which Mr. Polanski had pled guilty to unlawful sexual intercourse with Samantha Geimer, who was a 13-year-old child at the time of the crime against her, the district attorney has been unsuccessful in its efforts to extradite him because Mr. Polanski is a citizen of France and Poland, and France and Poland have refused to extradite him to the United States. At the time of our 2017 press conference, Mr. Polanski's criminal defense attorney criticized me for speaking out with my client against Mr. Polanski's effort to have his criminal case dismissed. His attorney verbally attacked me, stating, quote, "If you have a position, you come to court and you file it," end quote. Last year, that is exactly what we did. Our client, Jane Doe, has demonstrated enormous courage in filing her lawsuit against a famous director who previously pled guilty to a sex crime against a child and then fled to Europe to escape sentencing. Although the defendant has appeared to return to business as usual in his life, our client has not been able to return to business as usual since her victimization. The criminal justice system has not yielded a just outcome for the people of California, who had a right to see Mr. Polanski sentenced for his sexual crime against a child. But we look forward to our fight for justice and accountability for Jane Doe in the civil lawsuit which we have filed. And Jane Doe has a short statement. Here.
I'm just going to say that it took me a really long time to decide to file this suit against Mr. Polanski, but I finally did make that decision, and I've decided that I want to file it to obtain justice and accountability.
Thank you. And I'll be happy to take any questions. Oh, and before I do, in case there are any on Zoom or in the room, okay, we could stand up and hold this. This is a photo of her when she was a teenager.
How old was she?
She was a teenager. This was taken for her yearbook.
But when the crime happened, do you know how old she was, or
We do.
could you release them?
Under 18.
Under 18. You're just saying a minor?
At this point, we're saying under 18. We'll be more specific at the appropriate time in this lawsuit.
Gloria,
She definitely was a minor.
Gloria, in California, what's the statute of limitations for sex crimes against minors?
I can't tell you that at this time, but it's not retroactive.
Okay.
We can sit down, but I'm glad you brought that up for another reason.
Just for reference.
And that is, I have provided for you a copy of the lawsuit. The lawsuit, which is, of course, in the civil justice system, was filed in June 16th, 2023. That's a significant date because it is within the time period set by law for civil lawsuits to be filed by persons who allege that they are adult survivors of child sexual abuse. You will see in what I'm providing you an amended complaint which has a date of July on it. The reason that there are two different dates in what I have provided you is because we were not permitted at first under the law to provide his name. And so that's why, for the most part, the press has not reported on it, because when it was originally filed, it was Jane Doe versus Doe. We went through the appropriate legal procedures to request that the judge permit us to file an amended complaint with his name, because that's what's necessary. We can't do it without the judge's agreement and order that we be permitted to file his name, which we did. And that date, you will see also, is July 11th, 2023, where we amended the lawsuit and were able to include his name because the judge permitted it. So I just wanted to explain that we were within the time period to file a civil lawsuit. This, of course, alleges that it happened in 1973, I think we allege, and changes in the civil period of time, statute of limitations, to file a civil lawsuit allowed us to go back to that time period. That statute of limitations has now expired, but we did it within the appropriate period of time for a civil lawsuit. Criminal statutes of limitations cannot be changed by the legislature to be retroactive. It can happen in a civil lawsuit. It can go back to decades ago. For example, we filed a lawsuit against Bill Cosby, which we ultimately litigated, went to trial, and won. And that went back to the 70s as well for our client, who also was an adult survivor of child sexual abuse. It was a civil lawsuit. So even if it is too late to file criminally for the district attorney, it's not too late for us to have filed civilly.
I have a question. So how does this work? If he's in France, he's not coming back here, how would a civil case work? And if there is an award, maybe you can explain this, how do you get it out of him?
Okay, if there's an award, what's the last part of it?
How do you get the money out of him?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because he's overseas and he's not coming back,
Okay.
clearly.
That's unlikely that he will return, because if in fact he returns to the United States, he will be immediately arrested. He's a fugitive from justice. So it's a fair question, how does this all work? First of all, we did have to serve him in France, and we went through very carefully the French and California procedures for serving him, and had everything translated for him so that he would understand in French, although he does speak English, what this lawsuit is all about. And anyway, we submitted all of that to the court after we were able to serve him at his home in France. And now, he is not coming back, but this is a civil lawsuit. He does not have to appear for a civil lawsuit. If it were criminal, of course, he would have to appear if he's charged with felonies, and he was originally charged with a number of felonies for Samantha Guyman. But in any event, he pled to one and fled before sentencing. So the answer is, as long as we have properly served him, which we have, we can proceed with the trial. So, for example, Bill Cosby in our civil lawsuit did not appear at our trial. He would have had the right to appear if he wished to appear. He didn't. The only way we saw him was by video from his deposition, which we took. And that was introduced for the jury to see. So there was an award, in other words, a jury verdict against him, reduced to a judgment. That case is now on appeal. So bottom line is Mr. Polanski does not have to appear.
Are you gonna go to France to depose him?
We are going to depose him. At least that's our intention at this time. That could change. We've not made a decision as to where or how that would take place. We don't think we need to make that decision at this time.
But can he be ordered to pay you if he's, like, assuming you win, you know, his money's in France or wherever it is, how do you get that money?
Well, good question. How do we execute on the judgment, assuming that we are successful? And thank you for your assumption that we will be. Look, a lot of people said, oh, you'll never find him to be able to serve him in France, which was absolutely necessary for us to proceed with the lawsuit. We went to great lengths. We were determined to find him in France or wherever he was, and we did it. So we will do what is necessary to protect the rights of our client. And if, as and when, there is a judgment, we will make sure that we execute on it. We're very persistent, and we'll find out the way to do it, and we will proceed.
Gloria, we know that sex assault victims, especially minors.
I'm sorry, I can't
Oh,
understand.
I'm sorry.
That's
We,
right.
we know sex assault victims, especially minors, often don't report what happened to them for good reason. Was this ever reported to law enforcement when it happened?
When it happened, not at that time.
When was it first reported to law enforcement?
It has been reported to law enforcement. I will just say that.
Where in France did you locate, or your team locate?
I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Polanski?
I can't understand the question.
Where in what area of France did your team locate Mr. Polanski?
In which area of France
Yes.
is he living?
Yes.
Well, when we served him, that is when our process server served him, he was at his home in Paris. He has, of course, visited other countries, Switzerland, Poland. As I said, France and Poland do not extradite their citizens, so he hasn't been extradited. Fortunately for us, when our process server went to his home, he happened to be there.
Gloria, I have a question just on background. Are there two women that are accusing him, or are there more women that have accused him? Because we know about the 13-year-old, now we know about Jane Doe here. Are there others?
The question is, are there other women who have accused him?
Right.
We know
children.
Samantha Geimer. We know Jane Doe, who is seated next to me. We know that last week a trial began in France on behalf of my former client, Charlotte Lewis, who is suing Mr. Polanski, alleging that he defamed her when he called her allegation that he had sexually assaulted her when she was a minor, a heinous lie. So that trial began last week in Paris.
So we have 3 that we know.
3,
Accuser.
we have 3,
1 conviction.
2 have filed civil cases, including Jane Doe here today. Actually, Samantha Geimer was not only the victim in the criminal case, but additionally, reportedly also sued him when he did not pay the $500,000 in her settlement that he had made with her, and did not pay all of it.
What is his sentence? Just refresh our memory. What was his sentence for Samantha Geimer?
What was the sentence?
What was his criminal sentence? How much jail time is he supposed to be doing?
Well, this is very controversial, and I'll explain why. There was an allegation that the Judge Rittenbam, who is deceased now, had ordered that Mr. Polanski go to jail or prison for 90 days for a psychiatric report to be made upon him. Reportedly, he was released, Mr. Polanski, after 40-some days. Allegedly, according to his attorney, the judge had changed his mind and decided that he was going to sentence him to a longer period of time. Upon learning that the judge was going to sentence him to significantly more time than 90 days, Mr. Polanski fled and did not return for the sentencing. And to this day has not returned, but has continued his legal efforts to attempt to dismiss the case. Or he's not returned. He's been unsuccessful in his efforts. And that's why I read the statement from Judge Gordon, who decided the motion to dismiss, that, you know, a person who is in contempt of court, which of course anyone who has fled prior to sentencing, prior to entering a plea to a felony unlawful sexual intercourse, and that with a minor at the time, and has not returned to be sentenced, really essentially is not in a position to then ask the court to dismiss the case. That's where it is.
What, I know I can.
But he's continued, Mr. Polanski, to make movies, and that's what I meant by business as usual. Like his last movie, which recently played at a festival, and on many accounts, some have given it poor reviews, but anyway, he's continued to make movies in Europe. So that's what I meant by he's conducting business as usual.
Legally speaking, because he's in France, could he try to take legal action against Jane Doe for this civil case?
Could he try to what?
To take legal action against Jane Doe for, say, for defamation, alleged defamation, anything like that? Also, that he's a fugitive, does he have that right to do that?
We'll deal with that if, as, and when he decides to try to do that. I'd like to see him have the courage to return to the United States and do what's appropriate, which is hear what his sentence is going to be and follow the order of the court. like any other person who is not a famous movie director would have to do. I'd like him to take responsibility and be accountable to Jane Doe. And I might add that, Ms. Geimer has said she forgives him and so forth. Well, that's up to her. But for us, this is not about forgiveness, it's about accountability. It's about justice. So we're going to continue to pursue it.
Gloria, off subject, do you have any feelings about the Innocence Project taking up the Scott Peterson case?
I did represent Amber Fry in the Scott Peterson case, and she was the key prosecution witness against Scott Peterson. I have no problem with the Innocence Project attempting to determine if there is a basis through DNA testing to make an argument that Scott Peterson is factually innocent. Having said that, this case was thoroughly reviewed by the appellate courts in California, the criminal case. This case was affirmed by the Supreme Court of California, and I think it's an uphill battle for the Innocence Project. And I might add that every case that the Innocence Project has investigated has not resulted in findings that the accused or the convicted is in fact factually innocent. So there are a lot of questions to be asked, but we'll await the decision of the Innocence Project and their determination. But my feeling is if anyone can prove themselves innocent, then, they should have a right to try to do that. I wonder why these issues were not raised at the lower court at the trial level. Those questions remain to be answered. But even if they weren't, it doesn't mean that wherever anyone else's DNA is found, that would necessarily be relevant evidence, probative evidence, that the jury should have considered. So that's my feeling. Okay? All right, thank you so much. Oh, so this also is, these are the lawsuits that were filed. I guess we could hold this up too. This one is June. This one is also. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, last thing. Just because allegations of child sexual abuse date back to the 70s, let's keep in mind that my client in the Bill Cosby case, her allegations against Mr. Cosby were also allegations that he sexually abused her when she was a minor in the 1970s. Okay. Thank you.
And we can get a copy of those?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, right here.
right here.
Oh, thank